have to figure out ways to help a process of self-selection, either by rating documents or providing people with a way to navigate all the material that's out there. Prediction markets, in my view, are actually really well designed to do exactly this, because you run multiple markets at once, and people self-select into those questions that they think they know something about. So if you have 10 questions, you'll only make a trade on those few that you feel quite confident about. So it kind of overcomes this problem that you talk about to some degree.
For us, we went for a very grassroots approach, just opening something up, making it broadly available, and then we literally went, desk to desk to desk to desk, talking with people individually, understanding their needs, and then helping them understand how they could actually use the broad tool to meet their niche need. And once you got them started, they usually found that there was value in doing it broadly that they would have never thought about before. Every time we tried to do a top-down approach where we would someone would say we want an admiral or something would say we want to use Intellipedia to do this, it failed miserably. Because everyone who didn't want to do it expended 10 times as much energy to make it fail as they would have to have just done it and made it succeed. We had people calling lawyers and saying, how can we make sure that this doesn't do with this, or they're looking for reasons why not to change the work practice. But if you keep it broad, keep it open, and then seek the individuals who are willing to try a new way, they'll tell the stories to the people around them, and then it just grows. It's a long slog to do it that way. But I think, for us at least, that has served to be the best model to keep this growing over time.
Thanks. It sounds like proselytizing to me.
We'll take these last 4 questions. Okay. My question is specifically about prediction markets, going off something that Ryan said. He pointed out that there are, in the context of a prediction market, certain questions that are seen as distasteful, even if they're being asked in good faith and with good intentions. I was wondering if Ryan could expand on that, and Robin could explain whether or not you think that that's a stumbling block that one day prediction markets could overcome. And if there are certain questions that can't be asked in that context, how are there other technologies or techniques that the other panelists are aware of that might be able to deal with those kind of questions, such as the likelihood of a default of a country on its debt?
So there's a number of reasons why people might not want to ask certain questions. One of them is they don't want to know the answer, which is common and important. Another is they might want to know the answer, but they don't want other people to know the answer. So a prediction market is a more public thing. Maybe they'd rather find these things out through private channels. Certainly, there are the kinds of things that they don't want to know because they're illegal. So in many organizations, there's a legal concern about insider trading. So if you ask questions that are too directly about the main business of the company, then every trader who sees that price is interpreted to be an insider, and therefore their stock trading is restricted. And that's a way in which some kinds of questions are off the table for that reason. And then, of course, other kinds of things might be considered offensive or immoral because you can't talk about the number of deaths or something like that. So, but these are true about other mechanisms as well. Did you want to add?
Sure. Well, there are some questions that I see. The World Bank is a bit of a unique case because in some cases it's a market maker. Some companies may act in the market, but they don't have themselves an effect on the price of a good or service or whatever it happens to be. But in the case of the World Bank, if the World Bank says that this country is no longer, there are problems and it could default, that actually may precipitate that actual reality. So the problem for the bank to ask a question like this is, if a prediction market asked, will country X default, and that became public knowledge, which the assumption is that this kind of thing will be porous outside the institution, then you could actually precipitate something that you don't want to happen. So there's certain really high-level questions that I see as always being off the table for an organization like the World Bank. Now, for smaller organizations, that may not be as much the case. There's a second tier of questions which I really want to be on the table and I think can be on the table, and those are questions that relate to specific projects that the World Bank carries out in the field. So World Bank projects get rated at the end of their, after they're done. And I was talking with Robin about this just before the event. This would be a perfect application of the technology to rate, will this project receive an A rating or a B rating or whatever, so that the senior managers have some very good idea in advance, this project has gone off the tracks, we need to do something about this. And then they know this other project is fine, we don't really need to pay attention to that. So those are the questions that I think, at least for our organization, we really need to focus on.
Even that would be sensitive at my organization. For example, if we had people bet on what they think the actual launch date will be versus the other one could be too politically sensitive to have people actually predict upon. So I think it may vary depending on the organization quite a bit.
And you asked what were some of the other approaches that might work. I'll come back to one of my main mantras, which is breadth or broadness, because the more narrow your network, the more narrow your tool constrains the participation, the more likely they are beholden to a single manager or a single authority. So one of the reasons that the web is so vibrant is because not everyone is beholden to the same set of authorities. So while I might not be able to ask a question, Emma can ask the question. And so once the question's asked, then others will join the conversation. And I think this, again, is one of our successes of Intellipedia, is it's not actually owned by any one of the 16 intelligence agencies. It's owned by the DNI, it's maintained by the DNI, but there's a very robust debate that happens that probably wouldn't happen in any one agency because there are many different viewpoints and constituents that contribute and participate in it. So I think that's one of the ways of breaking down the wall, is just making sure you have lots of different viewpoints that can come in.
Thank you.
So I bought Adam to win American Idol at 85 and lost my Play Money shirt. How do I convince my decision makers how do I help them overcome the vividness bias to make them believe that in the long term and in the gross, the prediction market will actually be well calibrated?
Data, maybe?
I mean, but how do you overcome that vivid bias? I mean, when you have such dramatic failures, it will, and you have a risk avoidance, culture, how do you get people to realize that, that dramatic loss is not going to
So when you forecast something to happen at a 90% level, that means 10% of the time you'll be wrong.
still fail, right?
If you can't get your clients to understand that, you're lost, really.
If anyone else has any experience of overcoming that bias within government decision making, I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
I could just add one more thing, which is that this is a little mistake I made when I first set up the markets. It's useful if there's already some other type of forecast for whatever outcome that you're looking at. If you can ask the question precisely as that forecast already exists, and you can show that your forecast was superior, that's a much easier way to convince someone that this prediction market is successful. Because if you just say, well, we're right 80% of the time, who cares? But if you say, we're right 80% of the time, and the next best technique for forecasting is right only 75% of the time, then it's a little bit easier to make that sell to someone who's in a position of making decisions.
That's what I meant by data.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. This has been, I really appreciate your contributions tonight. It's a really interesting panel. And I think my question really could be answered by many of you, and I hope you can all contribute in some way. Basically, I'm also working in the World Bank, and I'm facing certain dilemma in terms of using collective intelligence mechanisms. And there's a lot bubbling up, but it's oftentimes, as Dr. Hansen alluded to, younger, junior staff people who get excited about these technologies, they try them out, and there's not always the buy-in that's requisite. And so what ends up happening is that we've tried it, we've done it, it failed, no more. And so my question is, Where's this